Hey, what's going on? You know who it is. It is Bruce Short, the Michael Jordan Hotels. Today we have Daniel Lamb is in the house, area general manager for this hotel and a couple others. And we're over here at the Marriott today. How are we doing today?
Doing well.
See you.
Good to see you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. I always ask this question. How did you get started in this business?
It was probably say, I don't want to say a mistake, but it was the luck of a draw, right? 16, got my car and just wanted to no longer work in the grocery store. One of the first job that I had. And, I obviously, lived in Central Florida. So went out, bunch of hotels, applied at Disney, applied at Universal, just went, up and down the strip of hotels that we have out in Kissimmee, the Orlando area itself, and just started applying. And that's how I ended up getting into the industry itself. Either you work for the mouse or you work in a hotel or, and here I am, 20 something years later. Started off as a phone operator back then, and the rest is history.
Wow. Wow. Today we're going to be talking about what to do when you get promoted, the top mistakes people make when they get promoted. Everybody wants to get promoted, They feel like, hey, you know what? They're ready for more responsibility in their bank account. And, they feel like they've been in a position for too long. Are they ready to take the next step? And then they get the promotion and they usually have like one of these 5 problems or all of them. What are the most common problems you see when, people get promoted? We're going to break it down in 5.
Well, actually, I'm going to add one too, right? Because I think just thinking about it here is like some people, or some professionals want to get promoted, but they're not ready to get promoted. They're just looking at it as a paycheck, right?
Yes, right.
And that just sets them up for failure right away. So you got to be true to yourself and say, okay, am I ready to take on that next step or take on that new responsibility? But there are also those that are very shy and don't want to take on, are less confident in themselves and don't think that they're ready to take on their role. But I think the first thing that everyone has to really understand, when they're going through their career, and especially in hospitality, is that are they trying to get into a new role too quick, too soon because they think they've mastered their current role?
Correct. I agree. And I've seen that happen quite a few times, and they usually end up not getting to their true potential because they're looking at it for the wrong reasons. So that's the number one question you should ask is, why do you want to get promoted? Is it because the money? Because more money always equals more responsibility. And if you're ready for that responsibility. So like, what is the first mistake that most people make? I think one of the first mistakes is that they don't have like an exit strategy. Like they don't have someone that they train to get them out of that position and into the new one.
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of, when you get promoted inside an organization is that you're still in the same company. But then the other fallacy to that is that you may end up taking on 2 tasks at the same time because you just walked away from your role and moved into your new role. So it's important that whoever comes on board, you embrace them and you spend time with them too. Train them, spend time with them so that they can understand what worked for you and some things that you couldn't figure out. But just because you couldn't figure out doesn't mean that you weren't successful. But now you have another set of eyes that can help look at the bigger task at hand. But spending time with the person or the individual that's going to take on the role that you just left will also take off a lot of the burden that can come as you take on the new role. Because naturally, when you get promoted inside of an organization, the person that's going to take on your last role will look up to you and use you as a resource.
Absolutely. What's number 2, like the second mistake most people make when they get promoted?
It is the vice versa, right? The second mistake is that someone, comes in and it's overconfident and they don't ask for help when they need it. And they'll sit there and, this phrase that's always used, they bang their head against the wall to try to get an answer. There's professionals out there that's in your group that have been in that role. Be humble about it and ask for help. Asking for help is not a weakness. But I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes an individual that gets promoted into a role that has not done the role before. They see that as a sign of weakness that they haven't, by asking for help. And that's naturally, asking for help is a good thing. That shows that you're willing to learn.
Correct.
A lot of the young professionals that walk into these roles that they just got promoted into sometimes just refuse to ask for help, or they're just bang their head against the wall. That phrase, right? They're like thinking that, they'll figure it out. But if you can figure it out by using colleagues and individuals inside your company to get you the answers or help you unearth certain answers, then you can become very successful quickly or quicker in your new role.
And that costs a lot of money, because a lot of time you're being promoted from a hourly position to a salary position. So by not asking for help, you're doubling your hours for no reason, and you're still getting the same.
And that's the thing, right? And then you're not asking for help. You get overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
You're in a new position with new responsibilities. And at the same token, you've probably got the individual that took on your last role coming to you at the same time. So asking for help is so that you can vocalize the things that you don't know. A good company will provide resources to help you cross those hurdles and make sure that you can understand, because it's their success will be based on your success.
Correct. I still ask for help to this day. And the reason why is because it could be something that I haven't done in 10 years. And things change in 10 years. So even if I may know the answer, my answer may be outdated, be ancient, it's vintage. And I just need to get a new perspective on the task that I'm doing, or the role that I'm trying to help someone train for.
100%, right? A front desk manager, a front office manager, which, I haven't been in that role 15 plus years, right? That tells you how old I'm going to be and what generation. That's kind of scary, right? But it's very different. What we expect from our front office managers today is not what we expected 15 years ago. So it's important to stay relevant by speaking to your colleagues and speaking to those that are currently in that role today. Between all the brands that are out there, along with the technology, embracing that technology, right? So when you embrace that technology, some other FOMs out there may have tricks, buttons that you can push, reports that you can run, dashboards that are available that they're going to be willing to share, versus you having to sit there and try to, let's say you're getting promoted from, very one that's very simple that you see that occurs a lot across our industry is going from a front desk supervisor to a front desk manager or a front office manager. It's not simple to get there. Let me correct that, for a second there. But it's not simple to recreate a dashboard or a report or a checklist. But why not use an established checklist or an established dashboard that someone's already built? Why sit there and spend hours trying to build something when you can use your colleagues that are out there? Granted, back when we were front office manager, there were no dashboards. Everything was paper, and using Excel, and you calculate your own metrics and so forth. Now everything's there. There's no text messaging, right? Definitely there was no text messaging. But there are processes that are out there, and it's very important that you connect with the community that's within the role that you've got promoted to, and have that conversation. What has worked? What hasn't worked?
Absolutely.
I get that today, where I get a lot of messages that get pinged in me to me from LinkedIn. It's like, hey, I see that you've been in this role. What is your typical day? Don't be afraid to ask those questions. Because I do the same thing where when I took on and opened these 2 new hotels, a couple years ago, I wasn't shy in asking other general managers and other opening managers that went through these, the openings itself, is what were the expectations? What were your challenges? What did you have to expect that would work and may not work? Because there's going to be challenges that down the road. And I took those advices and their experiences to kind of figure out how to navigate those particular pieces. Just because I've been in this role for some time, I've learned from other professionals across the country on their challenges when they were opening hotels, and how to recruit, hire, and adapt to the needs of the brands that, and along with the hotels to the changing hospitality environment. So asking for help is important.
Nice.
It's not a sign of weakness. It's definitely a piece where you become humble enough to know that you can rely on other professionals in the community.
Now, what do you think number 3 is when it comes to getting promoted?
Someone gets promoted, they have that high energy, that they're just hungry, right? Which is great. But then the first thing you want to do is start changing things. You got to learn your role first.
Yeah.
Understand what the responsibilities, what are the nuisance and the day-to-day tasks that go on itself, and don't just want to change just to change things itself. It's important that, I'm not saying you have to master the role before you make changes, but understand, why do we do certain things? There's a reason why things are done a certain way.
And they were working.
Right? Sometimes the formula is that if it works and it's not broken, don't fix it. But there are certain things that to help efficiency before you start going in there and wanting to change the world, right? I like to say that to a lot of my new managers, that before you change the world, let's understand what the world and how it evolves today. Once you do, then start making changes, not quickly, but not slowly, but at a pace where your teams, because you've got to remember when you're in these roles, you're leading other team members, associates, employees in your organization or in your department. They have to be able to adapt to it too, because they've probably been doing things the same way for a good amount of time. So it's important that you understand the whys first before you go in there and start changing things itself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what do you think number 4 is?
I think number 4 is when you're coming into a role and the team thinks you're the new hero that's going to walk in and change and fix all the problems that they have. But we also got to understand that you're coming into a new role and you may not be able to fix a problem that's been a problem for who knows how long.
Mm.
But without voiding and making the individual coming to you feel that they're not important, take and put the list together. What's their concern? And what everyone has to always understand is that their problem and their urgency may not be your problem and your immediate urgent need. But one of my mentors always reminded me is that when you put a list together, and keeping in mind you have your daily list, but let's put together a problem list.
Mhm.
If you have 100 items jotted on this list and you can complete one item a day, in 100 days you've completed 100 items.
That's right.
Right? And that can also be fulfilling, but at the same token, you're addressing all the other problems that could be out there or challenges that are out there. But I think problem solving for others is going to be important, but you also got to problem solve for yourself. So at the same token, you got to be able to identify what is urgent on that list and then get back to it, but don't try to overaccomplish it in a short time period. So
Yeah, because you're just gonna get overwhelmed, and you're gonna be like, "Oh man, I can't believe I got all of this. I didn't know this position was gonna be like this, and it wasn't like that for the other person."
100%, 100%, right? That's why everyone's challenge and everyone's, problem per se may not be a big problem or a big challenge, but it does need to get addressed at some point. But you have to be able to filter it and be able to identify which ones are urgent and which ones are immediate to address. So I think it's always important to have a list. And, you go to my desk or you look at, my notebooks and things like that. I have multiple lists because when everyone that walks into my office or calls me or texts me, with their concerns, I always take it in, but I always make sure that the teams and the managers and the associates, they know I hear them.
Mhm.
May not be urgent because what's urgent on my list may not be urgent on your list, but it's urgent on your side type of deal, right? But I'll get to it at some point in time. And it's important that when you get to it and you accomplish or find a solution or you resolve it, communicate that so that they also hear that you've heard them out. It could be a month, it could be 3 months. There are things that it's taken me years to get accomplished at times for some of the concerns, right? But at least I keep them involved and I communicate back because they've spent the time to communicate to me what their challenges are. But again, it's always important to know that when you walk into a new role, you're going to get bombarded with everyone's concerns that they're hoping that you can fix for them itself. And doesn't mean that the operation hasn't been successful. It's that it's their urgency or their concerns and their needs. So I think it's important that you don't overwhelm yourself by taking on too much and trying to address every single concern. But it's important to record the concerns at the same token.
I see. So what do you think number 5 is?
I think probably number 5 is when someone is overconfident when they walk into a role.
Mhm.
They got that chip on their shoulder. I just got promoted, so I'm just going to go in there and, I'm going to show them what I got. And it's important that you want to be humble. And, a great example I will always use is that, every role that I've sat in, in my company I've worked for, is that every time I've taken on a new task, a new role, or been promoted, but we stayed humble. I try to stay humble. And at the same token, I want to walk in knowing that I know what I'm doing, but at the same token, not afraid to ask the questions and not afraid to listen to others. And a lot of the challenge, especially for individuals that get promoted and go into these new roles, is that they go in there and they're not willing to listen and not willing to hear what the challenges are, and they're not willing to collaborate with others. A lot of the, especially in our operations team that I've seen over the years, is that someone gets promoted and they become siloed in their department versus being open and having a conversation and talking to their peers and say, hey, what do you see that we can improve on to help, whether it's in communicating or into a process itself. So, going into a role once you get promoted is not to be overconfident, at the same token. Walk in knowing that you got the role, but at the same token, be open to suggestions and be open to advice and be open to the concerns that other managers may have for the role that you're walking into.
That's my greatest strength when I'm being called in to turn around a hotel, especially when it's like it's against a bigger company or a bigger management company, is that I know that all those departments is silos. So I'm like, I can move faster because everyone on my end, I make sure I cross train them, and I'm making sure we're all communicating together. But I know like the bigger companies, they're all siloed, they're all centralized, so the communication doesn't flow as fast. So that the fact that you even said that lets me know that you guys are on the ball.
Yeah, I mean, it's also important when you take on a new department or you take on a new role is get to know your associates or get to know your employees.
Mhm.
It's usually the shy one that knows what the challenges are and probably have a solution, but no one's heard them out.
Mhm.
And I think that's important because your employees that are in your team, they're in it on a day-to-day basis. They're in the trenches. So therefore they know what will work, what won't work, but you got to build their confidence and their trust so they can confide in you as their new leader.
Nice. I remember a general manager back in the day, old school, and he would make sure he sit down and have a meeting with every single employee, whether it be once a month or once a year, and just to get their input. One, to get comfortable with them, let them know they're not in trouble, and two, get their input to see what changes can be made as far as improvements, like whether it be a new item that came out that can get the job done faster, so on and so forth. So yeah, that's
Yeah, you'll see that a lot, especially if you in my group, as I walk through these hotels. Yeah, I have a lot of formal meetings and, whether it's Zoom or we sit down in a boardroom and we go through our strategies and look at performances and look at our metrics. And a lot of the times I get a lot of like great ideas, we're walking down a hallway, especially, here in this building, walk through the hallways and either in housekeeping or walk through the hallways in our back corridor or even on the kitchen line. I talk to the employees and they tell me what the concerns, what works, what doesn't work. A new menu comes out. Have you tasted the food? What do you think? What's the challenges? When is it really busy? What we think is busy, granted, there's a lot of reports out there today that you can tell when your traffic patterns are like, but understanding what the concerns of our employees too will help you find their solution. And I think that's the key when you get promoted into a new role. Is not always looking at a formalized meeting process, but grabbing these impromptus and while someone's having a cup of coffee during break and you're sitting there and you're having, if you're having lunch at the same time as one of your other employees or associates, team members, is bring up the topic. Hey, what do you see what's going on? So that way you can hear their concerns at the same token. It becomes neutral and in their territory versus in your territory as their direct manager or their direct supervisor. That's when an employee will be most open to discuss their concerns. Because when you put them in a spot in a formalized meeting in front of their peers, they may be too shy and they may not want to address it. And I think that's where recently promoted department heads or recently promoted individuals that go into these new roles, by doing that, you take the human side in your approach with your employees, and that will also make you successful in your new role.
absolutely. So how can everyone get in touch with you?
Well, through LinkedIn. So, go to LinkedIn and search for me at Daniel Lamb. It'll be listed as Daniel Lamb, Area General Manager for Economos Properties.
Fantastic. Listen, thank you for being on the show. I know you guys got a lot of good information. I know you can't wait to get promoted, but it's gonna take a little time. You're not gonna work for a month and then become partner or part owner. All right, just give yourself some time, develop your skills, master your craft, and then get ready for the next step. This is Bruce Shorb, the Michael Jordan Hotels, signing out.
My name is Daniel Lamb. I'm the Area General Manager for Economos Properties, representing the Fort Lauderdale, Sparks, Nevada locations. It was actually an event that I had attended. I was actually a speaker for one of Dr. Peter Ritchie's events here in South Florida. I was on a panel, and Peter Wenzel was actually one of the sponsors, and that's how we ended up connecting back in 2021, I believe. There were no need at that immediate time for task force, but a couple months, after opening up our hotel, we had some staffing challenges itself across my portfolio of hotels. And that's when I remember meeting Peter at that event. And that's how we connected. And ever since then, the rest was history. The personalized service that I get with his team is what I enjoy using Wenzel & Fisher. Don't get me wrong, using any task force company is very expensive. But having the ability to brainstorm, work through the needs that we have at the hotels, to fill the roles that we have open, to fill those gaps while we're looking for the right candidates, is what I appreciate in my partnership with Wenzel & Fisher.